Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon. This is Kim Christensen, and I'm here with Brenda Hernandez. I just wanted to say a humongous thank you to everybody on this line for joining. We're in Portland, Oregon, and anticipating a little itty-bitty snowstorm. And there are folks across the nation, I'm sure, that are dealing with a lot of weather. So we're really grateful that we're doing this presentation early in the day, that we're here in the office and on a steady phone line, and we're excited and pretty enthusiastic to talk about the subject of grant administration. And with you, we geek out on this work all the time, and we're often left to ourselves and our own devices and our personal computers as we geek out over this work. And so we're excited to talk to you about this and bolster the work that you're doing in your communities, and hopefully are able to pass along some successful grant management tips that we've learned along the way. Before we get going, we'll do really quick introductions. We know that you already have our bios, so we don't have to delve in deep, but I'm going to hand it over to Brenda to do a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Hernandez. I am the Development Associate here at NICWA. I primarily work with Kim with a number of things, but specifically with prospect research, which I am very excited to be discussing with you today.
Great, thank you. And I am originally from Seattle, but I spent the last 8 years in Chicago working for several different nonprofits. And specifically, the last one I worked with, Instituto del Progreso Latino, was a big foundation-centric annual budget. And that's where I would say that the bulk of my experience comes from, as well as NICWA has a pretty rigorous grant schedule, both national and local private foundations. So as we go along, Brenda, I'm going to do most of the talking. Brenda's going to present on the research-oriented slides. But as we go along, she is going to try tackling any questions that come up in the public chat. Just because I might be distracted and not reading as I go along and talk, I want to make sure that we're responding to your questions in real time and able to incorporate them into our presentation as we go along. So in anticipation of that, we're going to start with some questions. So get your typing fingers ready. You can, yeah. So getting to know you. We want to get to know you. This is going to help us as we do this presentation. And the very first question I have for you is, do you have a development staff, a department that writes foundation grant proposals for you, or are you in programs and do this work yourself? I have to tell you, NICWA has a development department of 3. One of those positions is a member relations manager. She does also tackle grants. The 2 primary people on grants are Brenda and myself, but also Dr. Kostelik, Sarah Kostelik, our executive director. When it comes to government grants, because as you know, they're giant, we also partner with tremendous program staff that we have here. Most notably our senior advisor and founding executive director, Terry L. Cross, who I think you all have worked with on the SOC communities. We also work with our wonderful program director, Corey Matthews, who I think you're in connection with, and our research team, and you name it. So it can look pretty different depending on the organization. At Instituto in Chicago, I had a team of 7, and we did almost all of the grant management. So it just really depends on your workforce sometimes. And it looks like all of you are doing the grants yourself, except for a few. All right, great, great. Well, no matter what, it's fantastic for everybody to have be on the same page about how to work through a grant process, and it's a wonderful skill set. The second question I have is, have you ever written a foundation proposal yourself? Great. Oh, wonderful. Okay. All right, so for the people who are saying yes, I suspect that this presentation is going to have some repeat information for you and hopefully some new information. So if you have a deeper question about you want to dig deeper into a subject, please post it and I'll try to tackle it. For the people who know this is your first time, I think that this will speak to you and it will be good information for you to start implementing right away. Do you know foundations that fund your service in your area? Have you already started to look for foundations? Do you know folks that are local that can fund your work? Oh, yay. I see some folks. Okay. All right. So that looks like a similar spread as the previous question. So this presentation will, if you haven't identified those folks yet, it will absolutely get you to that point. And for those who have identified them, this will get you to the point of interacting with them as soon as possible and figuring out how you can interface with them to submit a more successful and stronger proposal. So we're just going to go to the next slide and just dig in. How many folks, and you can type in to public chat, how many people are familiar with Giving USA data? It's an online, you can find, I think it's actually givingusa.com, but they have a ton of free resources. They specifically track giving trends in the U.S. From year to year, and in fact, the 2016 numbers just came out, so my 2015 contribution sources are not as up to date as I would like them, but initially when this data comes out, you have to pay for it. So the 2015 contribution data is free. The reason why I say it's important is because when you're talking about for those SOC communities that need to find matches for when you submit grants to foundations, they want to know what your fundraising plan is beyond them. It's really important to understand where all the contributions are coming from this piece of the pie. So total contributions in 2015 was a little over $373 billion. That's a ton of money. And we should be so proud of the giving community that we see in the United States. So that's a wonderful trend that increased over this last year, or in 2015. You can see that the biggest block are individuals. That has been a consistent block forever. Been doing this for 17 years, and that's always been consistent. It's notable in that particular ring, churches are included, so just keep in mind that it's a slightly inflated number for our purposes in those folks that have individual giving programs. But the bright spot and the bright news is that the next largest piece of the pie that we're going to be talking about today is foundations. And in 2015, it comprised 6.5%, totaling 16% of, it increased by 6.5%. Sorry to confuse you. In 2015, this slice of the pie increased by 6.5%, which totaled 16% or almost $59 billion. That's a ton of money. And of that, human services comprised about 12%, which is about $45 billion. So this is a pretty robust sector, and it's the best one to go after individuals. So that is the great news. And I haven't seen the 2016 numbers, but it just, from what I've heard across the board and in various trainings, is that this particular area in all giving across the board continued to increase. All right, where do you go? So why seek foundation funding? I'm guessing that a lot of you are already figured out why it's important for your programs. But I'll talk in terms of like why it's important to NCWA and how we found it to be useful. And I hope that perhaps by giving you examples of what works at NCWA and what we've been doing, that's the National Indian Child Welfare Association for, I think we didn't necessarily introduce that at the very beginning, but we say NCWA. We really zero in on the importance of diversification for our particular organization. We're a nonprofit. I know that folks that are on this call are, work for tribes, nonprofits, community-based organizations of all different sizes and shapes and have different types of budgets and classifications. But for us, we're a nonprofit, and our foundations, our partners look to us to diversify, and it shows that we're a strengthened organization, and overall it's just a strong thing to do, so that when you know that government grants might be a little tight in the next year because of politics, or if you know that the economy, I worked for a nonprofit in Chicago in 2008, and it was tough. Individual giving during that time period took a nosedive, and so it's really important for those organizations to have other pieces of the pie, to have foundation support, government support, bequests, and individuals, and the list goes on. So that's why diversification matters to us at NCWA. Along with that, innovation, I think foundations are tremendous when it comes to innovation. I think that they, in my opinion, are the best at this space, because I think individuals are a little bit they lag behind on innovation. Often individual giving requires like a track record and a proven track record before they'll give, whereas foundations are really eager to see and identify gaps in service and excited to talk to people who are on the front lines of this work, who know where the gaps are and know how to fill and address them. That feels innovative. They really take risks like no other donor. And so those often are some of the strongest applications. And I think that everybody that's on this call today is uniquely aligned to do this, because you do this work, you know where those gaps are. And then, of course, I know that there's a ton of people that are trying to do the match requirement that comes along with the SSC work. So that's another reason why to seek private foundation funding. All right, the fundamentals. So before we get started, I wanted to go over some fundamentals of grant administration. The content of what you submit for funding consideration should come from your own tribe or organizational priorities. For NCWA, what this means is that our board of directors, in partnership with the communities we serve, determine our 5-year plan. So we are towards the end of our 5-year plan right now and getting ready to start another round of planning. And I take a lot of, if not all, my direction from that and what the board and community said that they needed from NCWA. And so what this means is that that plan, whatever it is, come for each of you, should inform the program direction, and in turn, that's what and where you should be submitting for funding consideration. I would really encourage you to reach out to your counterparts if you're not sure what is the strategic direction for your program, to make sure that you have this in place, because it's really important in terms of being able to inform how you build this proposed program for funding, the strategy in it. Often applications will require you to refer back to how this is strategic for your organization and long-term planning. And they want to know that they're funding something that's not only filling a gap, but that it's also going to institutionally fix problems long-term and be a part of your programming. So you want to make sure that you're in alignment to that long-term planning by your tribe or organization. And then finally, on this particular fundamentals, grant writing ethics, I listed these here as a reminder that your ability to communicate effectively and work in direct and accurate and honest partnership with funders is important. This will determine future funding if they feel like what you submitted is what you delivered on, and if there was a hiccup along the way, they will absolutely work with you, but it's about that constant communication. Well, it's about communication and being able to honestly portray your work, it's just incredibly important. That's why later on when Brenda talks about the qualification process, identification and qualification process of potential foundations, that's really important to find that right partner, that they understand your work and they're a good partner not only to give you or fund the work that you're doing, but they also understand to defer to your expertise and that they work with you in the way that is helpful towards what you're trying to achieve. All right, on to the next. All right, so there's 4 types of grant proposals, and I've listed them here. The number one thing that I'm going to say about this particular slide is that when you're applying for funding, funders are looking for a good investment. That is just their number one focus with applications. They're looking for a good investment and how does it fit their goals. Because this is primarily, it's just a reality because they, like us, have to report out to their investors or their board of directors on a measurable impact. So what this means is that you not only come up with an innovative idea, but you also want to make sure that you can deliver on it, and you want to make sure, and this has been a challenge at NCLA from time to time, trying to figure out how to measure outcomes and impact and how to write that into grants. So it's something that we're still working on. As our programs evolve, it's something that every organization and tribe and program probably struggles with. But I'm telling you, the grants that do really well are the ones that are good at linking innovation and measurable impact. And second, and so I talked a little bit about how this is presented to them. That's certainly a big piece of the pie. If you consistently do this, you'll improve your chances in being able to renew funding when your grant comes up, because if you provide a way to measure your impact and you deliver on it, funders love that, and they'll be interested in your next iteration of your work. I'm guessing that the number one thing that you might be thinking right now is what constitutes a good idea. And I wanted to put in this slide because I have to tell you, over my lifetime, I have been a career fundraiser. I think at the very beginning, I did a lot of program work, but I've been in fundraising departments almost exclusively. And when we do foundation work and put together proposals, it always starts with having that person, that program person in the room to help guide the innovation and determine the content. And so we can't do our work without our partners over in programs. You're the most important people, and quite honestly, you are the best people, you are the best people to know this information, and this is because you're uniquely positioned to recognize where your service gaps are and how to address them. And so beyond just being who you are, which is innovative, doing really hard work on the front lines, all you're going to need is how to do strong project management and have a strong editor. If you can find somebody internally that can support you in doing editing and you have some project management skills, you're set. You'll be able to do this work. And if your development team, for those who have development shops and a development person, will absolutely say the same thing. We're your biggest fans, and we want to set you up for success. So, when I've been in trainings before for grants, or I've been in fundraising training through various associations, I often find that the reasons for declined grants is not something that people talk about until after the fact. And I often feel like the best learnings come from the grants that are declined over my career. I feel like I learned the most from those moments. I feel like those are the moments when you can call up the program officer and have a candid conversation, because you can't talk to them really in depth about your submission until you've submitted something and they've gotten back to you and declined. And so I feel like it's really important as we start to do this work together this morning to talk about the reasons why grants are declined. So the first one, foundation is unable to afford your project. This mistake can be avoided completely by just doing your research, and Brenda's going to talk about that in a little bit, but you should already know before you apply to them what their range of giving is, and you should be looking for other organizations that receive funding from them and how much they're getting. That should tip you off. Another way to find out the information prior is just talking to the program officer and getting a sense for them, what is the average ask amount. So that's easy to avoid. Your application did not fit what the funder is willing to fund, and this is something that you can also avoid by just taking a closer look at the terms of the foundation's priorities. That's on their website or it's in their application materials, and you try to interpret it to the best of your ability. But sometimes it's a stretch to fit their funding, or perhaps you're so far ahead of the curve on innovation that you see the good fit, but it's going to take some talking to the foundation over a period of time for them to come around and understand how you're filling a need. Maybe they haven't identified that need yet. So again, that's going back to the program officer and having a conversation is really important. Third, perhaps you need more time to more fully develop your idea. This often happens. I've been a part of applications where it's the first time we've conceived an idea and the first time we've written about it, and it doesn't come together as fully fleshed as a program officer or a board of trustees would like. And again, you just want to remember that you're being seen side by side with other applications, and so they're not looking at your application in a vacuum, and that you're competing with other entities for funding, and they may have just been doing the work that they're submitting for funding longer, and they've been writing about it for a longer period of time. And there is something more fluid about, so I've been at NCWA for 2+ years, and this is my 3rd year going into writing about our requests for information. This is the area where we do a ton of direct service. I have to tell you, my ability to write and innovate and come up with suggestions is much more fluid now than where it was. I think I wrote my first grant for this to the Spirit Mountain Community Fund, which have been wonderful partners of this work for us over the years. I think I wrote my first grant in this area within a couple weeks of starting work. And so sometimes it's about the person's capacity to understand the complexities of the work, or it can also be that the program just needs a little bit more zhuzhing and how you frame something. And again, you can get that information from your program officer. I'm a big proponent, and I'm not shy about reaching out to program officers because they expect you to reach out to them. They expect to talk to you. This is their role. They represent the foundation. They represent the board of directors or their stakeholders, and they're the ones that know how to give you tips on how best to present your work. Now, you shouldn't let it take you down a path that isn't representing who you are, and then again, that goes back to the qualification, and some of Brenda's slides that are coming up will give you more direction on that, but you don't want it to take you so far off from what you're doing. But certainly if it's just about framing it in ways of just using some of the verbiage that how they talk about, for example, child welfare looks different on their website versus how you write about it, perhaps trying to find a compromise between the two is the solution. And program officers are really great for that type of work. So I think I've talked about competition already, so I think we'll go on to the next slide. What are funders looking for? Well, they're looking for the moon often, sometimes what I feel like. But for NCWA, I'm going to just talk about, out of the basics and for program, I'm going to talk about the stuff that we've seen or the things that we find most challenging or most that have been important for us, and hopefully by sharing some of those antidotes, it'll be helpful for you. It's been important for us to position ourselves as experts. There's been a couple of some of the national applications that we've submitted where that's been really important. And how this plays out is you guys are the experts at doing direct service. So the wonderful foundations out there, there are a ton of wonderful foundations out there, a ton of wonderful program officers. The ones that are wonderful know that you're the expert in the field, and they will defer to your expertise. And so finding those partners in that space is really important, and part of finding them is knowing also how to position yourself in an application that you're the expert. So for us, this has meant writing up your greatest hits and figuring out how to incorporate that into your organizational description in proposals. We've also had several programs or individuals at the organization that have received awards or nominations. And so again, that's something that I also incorporate into our applications. I think sometimes applications will request a bio of your key people working on a project, and incorporating awards and nominations and how they're well positioned to do this work is really important. So, you know, I know it's tough for us to brag on ourselves sometimes, but this matters because it sets you up as an expert in the field, which we know you are. So it's been kind of a challenge for us because we don't want to be what I call braggasauruses, but this is your place to do it. Foundations and board of directors who only meet quarterly and, you know, have never heard of you before are going to be, they're relying on what you write and tell them about yourself, and you should be positioning all your greatest hits for them. Another item that draws our attention at NCWA is realistic budgets. And I am guessing that this is a challenge for everybody. It's been a challenge at a lot of organizations, but it's been pretty unique at NCWA because, you know, we have some proposals where, you know, we don't have any overhead that, like a foundation doesn't allow for overhead, but they want you to carry out the program, but the program has to live somewhere. And so you have to pay space rental, for example, or you have to pay for incidentals beyond just the salary. And it's not incidental to talk about health insurance. It's really important to provide an employee when they're working for you. So having realistic budgets and being able to understand when the application we're sending in has a match to it, and how you're going to find that money elsewhere, or being realistic about how much time a program staff member needs in order to finish that project is really important. Like, you don't want to do no-cost extensions because that's a cost inherently on your organization and a cost to that staff member in time. They're going to be working extra hours because they're, you know, for us, everybody's allocated to different grants. And if that grant period ends and yet it's not paying them to do that work and we had to extend it at no cost, that means that they're doing that work plus other work. So it just becomes problematic. So it all starts and goes back to having realistic budgets, and it also goes back to making sure that you're vetting foundations in the way that you're paying attention to what they're saying they will fund and what they won't fund. And for us, it's really important that they are willing to fund overhead and indirect costs, because we can't do our work without that being funded, and that means that we've essentially extended or enlarged our budget by submitting a grant but not having those other, you know, indirect and overhead paid for. I have to then go and find that funding elsewhere, and that can be kind of challenging. If you want to go find a grant, you then have to extend that work and then pay for the entire work for overhead and indirect costs through that other grant. What it means is you're going to have to go find unrestricted dollars, and it's tough building your unrestricted dollar fund. So budgets are important, and aligning them to what you're doing certainly and your outcomes, and having making sure that they are willing to fund what you're willing to do fundraising for. It's one of our biggest challenges, and so I'm guessing that it might be for you. And if you are ever interested in talking more about budgets, I'm always excited to talk to anybody who is finding innovative ways to approach this particular area. So if you're interested, always feel free to reach out to me. And then for us, it's also what goes along with the realistic budgets is realistic objectives, because then that makes it all work, that a program employee is able to carry out the work and essentially over-deliver, which makes foundations happier. Over-deliver on their outcomes is just a great way to end your grant year, and it will set you up for renewal. And having realistic objectives not only plays into realistic budgets, but also a great ending and next conversation with foundation professionals. And then the final thing that I would say on this slide is that NCWA regularly has conversations with funders when we're talking to program officers and we're getting site visits, or even I've seen it increasingly more so in proposals as well, is that there's a sustainability section, and I'm sure you guys know this section intimately, and you probably have stock language that you slot into that section. But having plans beyond a year of how you're going to not only do this work and what the next iteration of it is and how you're going to fund that work is really important. Like, what's your fundraising plan for that? And that all goes back to what I was talking about earlier. What's your 5-year plan? What's the organizational or tribal plan for your program and long term? And how does this project that you want to get funded fit into that larger perspective? And so making sure that your entire team is all on that same page is really important. I often say, like, it's not about just being on the same page, it's about a written document that everybody's working off of. All right, next. Prospecting, the very beginning of all things great in fundraising when it comes to proposal development. There are two things that I wanted to point out on the slide. One is everybody does research to find foundations. For those who haven't started on this path, you'll learn more from Brenda about where to go find those foundations. But specifically, I'm just going to set this up and tee it over to her for presenting on that prospect research work. There are two things that you should keep in mind as you go into researching. One is utilizing prospect worksheets. I can't emphasize this enough. I've seen prospecting with people who don't have a uniform form that they're filling out so that everybody's comparing the different funding opportunities apples to apples, or as close as you can get. And so what I linked to your PowerPoint is the prospect worksheet that comes from the Foundation Center. The Foundation Center, is everybody familiar with the Foundation Center? Could you kind of type in yes, no, yes, no? Okay. So I think Tristan, our member relations manager, is also on this call. If she could you go to the Foundation Center and post that link in the public chat? That'd be great. So for those who are not familiar with it, it is a great resource even if you're not a member. And this is something that Brenda was slightly surprised by, but you can go to the Foundation Center and gain access to free 990s. You do not need to be a member. You can go to the website to utilize tools. They make that all free. So don't be shy. Go and surf all over the place on that particular website. It's extremely helpful. Here I've already provided the prospect worksheet. Just to let you know, I took this and made it slightly different for our team, and we use OneNote. I created kind of a template in our OneNote, if you're familiar with Microsoft Word OneNote. So I use the Foundation Center resources all the time, even before we were members. So you fill out all these prospect worksheets, And then you want to figure out how to prioritize them. And I provided a suggested prioritization. For those who have existing funders, you should be always in constant contact with them and teeing up the next round of applications. If you've had recently lapsed funders, I define recently lapsed as the last 3 years. You could extend it to 5 years, but that's kind of a long period of time, and you might have to catch them up quite a bit to bring them up to a point of being recently lapsed. But no matter what, that is your next level of prioritization. And then prospects with whom you have connections. So let's say somebody on staff knows somebody that works at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You want to tap that person and you want to reach out to them and you want to have a conversation with them about who to contact and what's the inside track on how to apply for X, Y, and Z. You want to utilize those connections. Don't be shy. After 8 years of working in Chicago, which if anybody here has been to Chicago, lived there, or worked there, it is a town that knows how to do foundations. They also have a ton of private foundations, like major donor foundations as well, and or family foundations. And I would say that they're extremely comfortable and facile with reaching out to one another and having a conversation about whoever they know. It's like everybody knows everybody, and it's a giant city. And I have, as a takeaway, no matter where I'm at, it's good to utilize all the many different avenues that you might have to a potential funder. So don't be shy. And then, of course, cold prospects where you have no connection. I will say that when I was working at Instituto, we did quite a few prospecting where we had no connections to the foundation. And the times when I called up and talked to the program officer and asked them questions that I had pre-prepared, and then I submitted, and then I gave them a heads up that I was submitting the grant, that greatly increased their awareness of us and their willingness to talk to us. And in fact, we got quite a few grants through that avenue by just reaching out and introducing ourselves and taking time to do a Q&A with them. So that's something that you can do beforehand. All right, next slide. And I'm going to hand it over to Brenda to talk about research.
How does prospect research work? As Kim mentioned earlier, the first step to finding the right foundation is prospecting. Good foundation prospect research will equal stronger mission fit, which means larger grant amounts and higher likelihood of funding. I greatly and truly believe this. The first thing you need to do before prospecting is to know what you already have. Has the funder given to you before? Do you have any connections to the foundation? And to always remember that you have the same access of public resources as everyone else, which I will explain more in a few moments. Secondly, what do you need to know about the funder? What information will benefit you in the long run? Knowing the foundation's giving history, their interests, finding out who makes the decisions regarding giving is essential. Also, having a connection doesn't hurt. This information will help you have a sense of right fit or not. For example, you find a foundation that fits perfectly, they have given to an organization like yours and have the capacity. You submit an application only to find out that they don't get to your region or their deadline has passed. You can save a lot of time by just researching them before you decide to apply. And also going through a qualification process, which Kim will discuss in a couple more slides. Spending time researching will benefit you and save you time in the long run. Research tips. So Google is definitely your friend with prospect researching. Using keywords instead of asking full questions will narrow down your search results, as well as, there's always your local library. It is a public resource, which everyone should be fully utilizing, and some people often forget that it is there for your use. But I will continue discussing resources in the next slide. Let's see. Some foundations you'll find after, Googling or using any search engines, you'll find that they don't really have information easily on a website, or they don't have a website in general. In that case, finding their tax form 990s is your best bet to find the information you need. I included in the slides a sample form 990, which is from the Mayor Memorial Trust. You may or may not have downloaded that with the slides. So if you open that up, if you would like to open that up, there is, if you go on page 1, with the form 990s, you'll be able to find, the foundation's contact information, so their address and phone number, who is on their staff or on their board of directors, as well as their giving history. Foundations are legally required to provide this information, so if they don't have a website or you can't find the website, finding a tax form 990 is essential. You'll be able to find that information if you would open up that PDF. You'll be able to see on the first page, you'll see their address and their phone number. If you scroll down a little bit to page...
And before you do that, I just want to give people the heads up. Just go ahead and click on the word sample. It's hyperlinked for you. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. And then, sorry to interrupt.
No, okay. All right. So you'll find all that information in the Form 990. This Form 990 is a little bit longer. It's bigger just because it is the Meyer Memorial Trust. Some foundations, Form 990s, are smaller in length depending on how large their foundation is. But one thing I like about the Form 990s, which is that you'll also be able to find application or letters of interest information, which you'll find on page 10 of the Meyer Memorial Form 990. Some foundations will indicate if they accept pre-selected organizations or not, which for me, I find it's very essential that you find out if they even accept applications. It'll save you a lot of time. Also, what documents they require.
And I would just jump in there. For those who don't accept applications cold, that means that you just need to call the program officer and start talking to them about your program. So.
Yes, I agree. Just
yeah.
Establishing that relationship.
All is not lost.
And also in the Form 990, you'll also find out, what documents they require with the application, and also in what format they want that in. As you can see in the Form 990, since Meyer Memorial Trust is a pretty large foundation, they have stated there that just to check their website. Smaller foundations will actually have this information where they tell you what format they want it in and what other documents that they want to be attached with the application. And also, they will also tell you to whom you should address it to, which I feel that it's key to know who you're, sending this application to, because that is probably the best person that you should be contacting if you would, like to speak to someone, and as Kim has mentioned, to establish that relationship with. And they will also include an address to where you should send that application.
Great.
So, research resources. You should fully utilize free public resources. As I mentioned earlier, your local library is your best friend. I can't say that enough. So every library has a research component that you are free to use, and you should use. And all you pretty much need is a library card. So, so I suggest that if you do not have one, get one. It is very beneficial. So, there are also search engines, as I mentioned before. There is Google, there is DuckDuckGo, which is a little bit less without ads as Google is. You should be, using these heavily, especially when you're trying to find foundations, Form 990s, or the foundation's website, or even information about a specific staff member or a board member. As Kim mentioned earlier, Foundation Center is a great resource. I use it heavily as well with search engines. However, it is also a paid subscription. But again, as Kim mentioned, that there are There are resources that you can use for free, such as their Form 990s finder. But searching for funders and any grants specifically within a specific criteria is a resource for members only, but that is not to deter anybody from using Foundation Center. It is a great resource, and I highly vouch it. There are also, full paid subscriptions, such as Wealth Engine and Noza Search. Wealth Engine is a database that you can use to search either company or individual wealth. The type of information that is also listed on Wealth Engine is also their address, their phone number. And one thing that I really like about Wealth Engine is that they have something that they call a P2G score, which is their propensity to give, which is pretty much a score that they give each company, foundation, or individual, like their likelihood to give, which is really great to know if they even have that history of giving. And also with Noza Search, it's another database, but it holds charitable contributions for individuals, foundations, corporations, and other nonprofits. So let's say you want to find the last 10 years of a certain foundation, but you can't find every single year of their Form 990s. You can easily type in that foundation's name on Noza Search, and on the search results, it'll give you pretty much all of their charitable contributions within that time limit. So that's a great resource, but again, it is a paid subscription, and you could fully work around it and find charitable contributions using public resources, again, with their Form 990s or looking through Google or DuckDuckGo.
I would also add that sometimes you can, depending on your library, you might be able to get access to Noza Search through your library. Your librarian, which we didn't list here, is one of the best resources ever. We have an internal librarian, and she is super helpful and resourceful. I would also add that if you are not yet, you might consider signing up for a fundraising, like the AFP. Are folks familiar with AFP? It's the American Fundraising Professionals Association. They can be kind of pricey, so that might, if that's not an option, there's usually local chapters that are non-AFP related that are all about supporting fundraisers or development professionals that you might be able to tap into, or a city near you. I say this because if you're a member of an association, sometimes you can receive additional funding or support and also gain access to Noza Search. That was certainly the case in Chicago. Now, with that being said, Chicago is definitely a bigger market, but if you're close to Chicago, that might be a resource for you, because you can often, in this wonderful day and age of electronic and Wi-Fi and like technology, in this day and age and Wi-Fi, you can be in an association and receive those types of services and access over the internet. So that's the only thing I would add. And then I love that there are folks that know about Chicago. Thank you, Leanne. You know, the thing is Chicago's been doing foundation work for years and years and years, and I think that they're far and above, far ahead, kind of similar to New York, and savvy about how it works. And so I think that there's real lessons to gain from there and apply in other cities and towns and relationships. So before we get into qualification, I wanted to quickly define it for you. One of the things that we got back when we initially put together this PowerPoint, Brenda and I, was that we got the question of what's qualification? And I looked around, I didn't find an easy definition, so you have to know, everybody on this call, that qualification, that this definition is the one I created out of my head, or how it applies to NCWA. It's the process of assessing fit between an organization and project and potential funder. And For me at NICWA, this is the most important. This is what sets you up for success moving forward. It determines the right fit. It means it's going to determine how you interface with this foundation, what kind of partners they're going to be to you, and how it's really going to predetermine how the project itself is going to go. There are a lot of variables that are involved in making it a good fit, and for NICWA, the biggest concern has been good relationship with program officer. We have some amazing ongoing foundational relationships, like Meyer Memorial Trust being, I think, our very first funder and believed in our mission and work, and they've been with us our entire life history. And there are some new ones that we have garnered over the last several years who, again, it all starts with that good relationship with the program officer. And then along with that, for us, what makes a good relationship is whether or not they defer to our expertise. That's really, really important, and I just can't emphasize it enough. I think that's where good program officers, when they come from that place, and most of them have either done program work or have already done this work, so they understand the importance of deferring to you. The good ones do that. So, and then another past concern for NICWA has been about whether or not the application will allow a certain percent of indirect costs. And I did talk about that earlier. Expand, does the application force you to expand your budget? And those are the two ones that have come up for NICWA, and I think I've already talked about that. So let's go on to the next slide. Qualification pitch. There are two areas of the qualification process that I'm going to recommend to you. The first one is about building the team that you are going to review the prospect worksheets that we talked about earlier, that you filled out with all of Brenda's good resources and tips. And, for us at NICWA, that means myself, the program director, the executive director, the operations director, and, oh, yes, of course, fiscal services manager. So that's been a core team, and we have as a standing agenda to, when there are prospects to review them together. And so if you don't have that team already, we've made over here on the left-hand side of your screen some suggestions of who could be on that team, but you're going to want to assemble them. You're going to want to meet regularly, and you'll want to prep them. So the biggest thing that you want from this team is to prompt discussion and debate. You don't want to go in there hoping that they just check off on an application or a potential funder. You really want to hear all of the dialogue that everybody has, because according to this list, suggested list I've provided you, they're all going to have different ideas and perspectives about what makes a good partner, and those voices are integral because they're the ones that have a role in carrying out the work. So on the right-hand side of the slide, I've created some suggested questions for discussion. In the past, when we know that we're going to be tackling some pretty tough funder conversations, what I've done is created a list of questions that will prompt debate, and that's important to do. Because things that have come up in that conversation is, do you have existing staff to do this work? Well, your operations person and your program director and the financial fiscal person are going to all have a different opinion on what that means. Can you do this work with existing staff? Are you going to hire? Is there lag time? How do you want to build that into your proposal? How much time is that going to take? What kind of resources is that going to take from other departments? And so that's going to have an impact on your outcome and being able to reach your goals. And are your goals in alignment with not being able to get a staff member into that position after 2 months, because it takes a while to get somebody on board. So those are important debates to be having when you're thinking about qualification. And you're going to spend a significant amount of time as staff members just building the proposal. And even if it doesn't get funded the first time, it creates a template that you can that you can use for other applications. So you want to put the effort and time into the first grant that you do on a project and make sure that it's accurate to what you need to carry out the work and set yourself up for success. And so we've had great debates over what does our environment look like? Has the economy slowed? Are we sure that if this particular grant requires a match, do we feel comfortable in the economy to tap individuals? We also do tribal solicitation for our ICWA defense work, and so what is the timing of tribal budgets? Do we know that? What's the capacity and what region? And so these are all really important conversations to have as a group before you decide to go after a grant. Proposal development. I know that I've talked in terms of the top tips. I have already tackled homework, do your homework, which is, pay attention to, knowing what your long-term goals are and researching whether or not it's a good fit. So you do your homework in the qualification phase. And following directions, I think, is self-explanatory. I will say, as a side note to follow directions, I don't think foundations make it very easy sometimes to follow directions. I've done proposals where directions have conflicted with one another. You see one thing on their website, but what the program officer emails you looks different. And then for some folks that have a physical application that they're filling out, sometimes that can be different. So if there is confusion about directions or conflict, you just reach out to your program officer and ask them a clarifying question. But it definitely makes it more complex. It's not always easy to figure out how to follow directions, but if you are, I think the key there is, again, is I think my theme for this presentation is just don't be shy. Reach out and ask. Along with that, being concise and clarity is all about being concise and having clarity in your writing is all about how you frame your proposal. I talked a little bit about this before, about how you may have to flesh that out over several drafts. I think also you're the most concise and clear about your work when it comes from direction from that larger long-term planning. So if you don't have that in place, you want to make sure it's in place before you start doing a ton of proposals for a program. The next one I would say is we're only as good a writer as our editor. I rely heavily on our proofing team. Our executive director, Sarah Kostelik, is a tremendous editor and gives really great feedback. And so while I enjoy writing, and I think I'm a good writer, I feel like the proposals that I put forth are only strengthened and bolstered because I reached out and relied on the community that I have here at NCWA and their willingness to take a look and make sure that what I'm writing sounds right and it fits the flavor of the organization, but that it also is setting us up and framing our work in the best light and setting us up for success in the future. And that can't happen without having those really key internal partners. So I know some folks really pride themselves on not needing an editor and being a strong writer. I'm of the school that everybody needs a good editor. And then you may want to set up an internal group of people who you go to at the very least proof your work. And you're going to want to set up that group of people who are going to give you feedback on how the program is being described or what the activities that you're proposing. You want to make sure you have that programmatic eye on that work before you get to budget building and submitting your grant. Foundations are not interested in funding duplicate efforts. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but I will give you a really great example. We currently are part of a partnership with several other national Native organizations, NARF and NCAI. We're all being funded for First Kids First grant with Kellogg, the Kellogg Foundation. And the Kellogg Foundation was interested in funding our work because we came together for a common cause. And instead of duplicating funding to 3 different national organizations essentially doing the same work, or at least touching on the same topic of work in 3 different ways, we strengthened the quality of our work, and because we intentionally are working together and coming together and collaborating around a specific issue. And so that is a great example of partnership, and we're really proud that that was something that was just announced this fall, and we're just thrilled to be a part of that work. So where you want to pay attention when you're doing research in your qualification process, as Brenda described, you want to pay attention who are the other local organizations who have applied for grants and gotten funding, and what type of work are they doing. Is there an opportunity where you could partner with them? At Institute, though, in Chicago, we were a social service, a community-based organization. We partnered with 2 other organizations on a particular project for low-income women that were focused on housing and domestic violence support. And so the Institute, though, didn't do housing and didn't do counseling and the other services that that were supported by the 2 partners. But what we did really well was provide financial administration and support and financial personal wealth building and whatnot, and getting them connected to job training programs and whatnot. So we knew what we did really well, and we partnered with our 2 local partners to make what we did better. And then, of course, don't inflate numbers in your budget. Think blueprint. The blueprint goes back to you want to make sure that you're doing long-term planning, and it comes from that. For us, it's our 5-year plan. And again, go back to USA Giving Report and look at what areas that you can diversify your funding. It can be as simple as going to another foundation or maybe a federal grant, a federal partner, or individuals. It might be a tribe. So you want to be cognizant that foundations are not going to want to be your only funder forever. They're going to want to feel like they're in this with a community of people that are supporting your work. So they'll fund innovation initially, but they will want you to grow with them in your work in terms of funding and future planning. Managing grant submission. I call this the mismanners of grants, grant making. So this is all your external contacts. You want to consider contacting the program for a quick check-in before you submit. You want to build that rapport. You don't want to be shy about talking to them, and I know that I've kept on harping on that for sure. So I want to make sure that you go away with that, because you guys are just the best people to talk to program officers. I'd say you're better than, or you doing the programs, or program officers are the most excited to talk to you over a development director, in my opinion. And then, you know, feel free to follow up with that program officer, but you have to do it after the decision deadline. They don't want to hear from you before because they'll have no news for you, but it's perfectly okay to reach out to them after the decision deadline. And of course, you want to make sure that you submitted it on time and accurately, and you know, how you figure that out is just paying attention to all their many ways of, you know, their website, what they email you, getting that into your Outlook calendar. You want to make sure that when you do get a grant that, you know, fundraising standards is that you thank the donor within 24 hours of receiving the check. So that's something to think about. Most foundations will send you a contract that you'll sign that has a bunch of information in it about how the year is going to go. Most people I've seen in the field over in development will just go ahead and sign it quickly and not pay attention to the fine print. The fine print is super important because they will tell you what you can and cannot do communications-wise. They're going to reiterate what you're going to get done and your goals. It's going to say when your reporting deadlines are due and where to go find that reporting material. So please read that contract. I see too many times mistakes happen in the administration of grant compliance, or there's grant compliance issues because they just didn't read the contract. So definitely read the contract. You sign it, you return it to the program officer. They'll most likely send out the check or do direct deposit in a certain amount of time. Once you receive that, it's 24 hours. You should turn that around with what I call the receipt thank you letter, and you want to make sure that you get it personally signed and you're not using an electronic signature by whoever is the signator on the letter. And then finally, you'll want to insert all of those deadlines for the next year for that grant into some mechanism that is going to remind you to do that report. For us, we use Outlook heavily. We even have a grant deadlines calendar that we track that sort of work through. So I just talked about all the external communication. There's also all of the internal communication that you're going to want to go through with your team. It's usually the people who are in the qualification process that you want to make sure you have that team in place that are going to manage the grants. The number one thing that I've seen in my experience why you don't get a renewal and funding is because the terms of the grant were not followed through. You did not follow through in your promise, and what's worse, I see some folks that don't communicate with the foundation when things have gone awry. So making sure that your internal team is in place and they know what their roles are prior to funding is really important. For NCWA, we manage this in two major ways. One is when I got here, we only had a grant management protocol for 1 year, we only had a grant protocol for grant submission, but not for the entire life of a grant. And that incorporated all the responsibilities of everybody on the team managing the grant. This has tremendous complications towards grant compliance. So the thing that I did and prioritized was to take that document and make it a robust document that had everything from the board's role to my role to our executive director to our program director to program team. It shows the entire life cycle, and it was helpful because we had a clear idea of how we're supposed to interface with one another. And if we were confused, we could pull out that document and look at it together and clarify. And then the second thing is, for those familiar with some of our curriculum, we do have a project management curriculum that we use internally, but there are a lot of project management programs out there and approaches that you can gain access to online or just through your own innovation. And so what we do internally is we do what we call a project launch, where we launch the project with everybody around the table. We present it, we explain it, and provide people the opportunity for a Q&A so that they understand what they're a part of. And then we put, as part of that project management, we have built-in milestones and check-ins. And I'm ready to go to the next slide. You know, I did see a question from Lawanda about, do you have a sample? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure we're keeping abreast. Okay, so again, you know, like I said earlier, you know, it's okay when you receive a no. It's perfectly okay. I've gotten plenty of no's. I think when I first started Institute, though, I started in, I think, October, and so there have been all these applications that have been submitted prior to my arrival. And in November, we got upwards of like, I don't know, 10 to 15 no's. I called it November. But then December turned around, and then I called December Yes-Ember. So, so having a, you know, keeping it in perspective is the most important. It's okay for you to get a no, because what this means is that it triggers a whole bunch of activities that you should really be following through, because if you follow through with what I've suggested here, you might just turn this around in a year and get funding very easily. Contacting your program officer, that's the number one thing that you can do. Once you've submitted something, they anticipate that you're going to call them and be asking them, give me feedback. They are the most well-positioned to know how to link what you're doing to resonate with those who are the decision makers at the foundation. I will say that sometimes foundations don't realize that something's an urgent need. And sometimes you're doing education over the phone with the program officer to explain how urgent, and that perhaps they've missed a window or an opportunity to fund something that you're on the front end of innovation on. So there's a bunch of different reasons for no, obviously, but you're not going to get to a yes from them unless you're having a conversation. And quite honestly, I've seen a lot of education happen in the space. I know that that's been the case. Terry L. Cross, who's our senior advisor, he has said that a lot of his work over the years for NCWA before I got here, so I'm able to benefit from all his hard work and input that he's done. He has said time and time again that a lot of his role as executive director for an up-and-coming small national organization, and we were regional to the Northwest at one point, and Indian child welfare is something that he had to talk about on many different levels of complexity with program officers to explain the importance of our work and our mission. So you might find that you're doing some education along the way. So don't be shy, be tenacious, schedule them, schedule the next application, put that contact into your mailing list or email blast. You can even ask them if that's okay. Program officers are just inherently inquisitive and interested in program innovation, so I think 100% you might hear that they're really eager to hear about your updates along the way. And then Brenda's going to present the next slide, so I'm going to hand it over to her.
Yes. So other helpful systems and resources. As Kim mentioned, having an internal system is essential. Having a protocol in place would save you time, headaches, as well as, having any standard grant boilerplate materials can help with, scheduling and managing your time when developing a grant. Kim and I mentioned Foundation Center earlier, and I cannot praise the site enough. Although it is a great resource, cross-referencing with other resources for accurate data should be standard practice, I believe. And also, I believe Kim mentioned OneNote. We use OneNote heavily. It is very helpful. It keeps us organized and having all the information be consistent. It keeps all the prospect research in one place, and I think that it's very user-friendly. Everyone is able to make changes to the document, and you'll be able to know who, and it saves automatically. So again, it's user-friendly. We use it all the time here at NCWA, and again, it'll save you from headaches, I believe. And also, being subscribed to certain websites and newsletters are always helpful. I believe that it adds, more benefit, and it's also a really great resource of information when you just receive a newsletter, finding out who has, you kind of want to know who has given, a $1 million grant to a specific foundation. I think that it's really, really beneficial just to know that information.
Especially if they're giving in your area of work, and if it's an organization that you could potentially partner with as well. So that data is great. Oh, okay. And then I would just add that develop and maintain standard grant boilerplate material. I have to say, NCWA is still on the forefront. We're still just trying to get this together. It's never, Terry, our founder and senior advisor, he was a one-person shop, and so we're in the process of trying to institutionalize that and get that into one place so that we don't have to. All of our information is a little disorganized right now, and we're still in the process of trying to get that under control. So if that makes everybody feel better, that is just I think, a common challenge, but we're fighting it as we speak. I know that we went over a little bit, and I'm just so excited that people here are still with us, so thank you. But we do have some final questions because both our program team, those folks who are working with the SOC communities, as well as Tristan, who works with our members, it's helpful for us to get a sense of where you need additional questions, or where you have additional questions, because it will inform how we train and what we do going forward on this subject. So if you could take a moment and just type in an area that we've talked about in private grant area that is challenging for you, that you would like more training or more information or have additional questions, if you could do that for us right now, that will be helpful towards our team being able to respond and continue doing this good work. Okay, research. Okay. Thank you, Grace. We're going to write these down. Well, Grace, you're singing Brenda's tune. She loves research, so I think that's something we can do. Qualification. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jean. Okay, yeah. You know, Jean, you shared an ongoing challenge. We do have a research team here, so maybe also connecting you to some of our community-based participatory research projects that we've done might really help in your proposals as you're kicking them through the door. And I even think we have our research manager on this call as well, so she might be able to help you and connect with you. Oh, great. SAMHSA guidelines? Yes, absolutely. You know, one of the questions that we have on this question, the next question is about whether or not you all have access to the NCWA Match Toolkit. Okay, budget says well. Thank you. I know that our program staff, maybe Corey Matthews, Jennifer, that can help you with some of the guidelines and structure for reporting, can help you with that. Oh, great. Thank you, Jennifer. We have a match toolkit, so if you could, Jennifer, what community are you with? Okay, great. That's right. Okay, so we'll have our team reach out to you. Thank you. And then that goes for everybody. Just let us know, like Jennifer did, whether or not you know if you need any help accessing the NCWA Match Toolkit. And then finally, are there any other questions? Sure thing. Thanks, Jen, or Jennifer. Thank you. Like I said, Brenda and I love this work, and we're really excited. In fact, as people are typing in their questions, I'd like to advance to the next slide, because in this PowerPoint, we also include all of our contact information. So please feel free to give us a call if there's any problems or challenges that you're facing, or you could use, you know, our advice. Brenda is a research genius and mapping genius, so she is a fantastic resource. So I really want to thank everybody for joining us and being game for going a little over our time. Oh, thank you. Yay. It was helpful for some folks. So yay. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. It's been such an honor to get to do this. It's my first webinar and Brenda's, and you allowed us to geek out on something that we love to talk about. So thank you for joining, and we hope we are helpful. And I am hoping that we'll get to hear about some good stories and some successful funding as you guys go forward. Please let us know and keep us in the loop, so that include us in your celebration for sure. It's important to celebrate. This is something that I incorporated every place I've been to, and for us, we have our rattles. And every time we get funding, we take a moment for all those who are involved to shake the rattles and celebrate, and so you guys should too. Please include us in that celebratory email or reach out and let us know if we are helpful or if you need additional support. So thank you.